Good morning to all you fathers out there. I want to wish you all a happy Father's Day. Hopefully this lesson today will not be as long as it was last Sunday. So I'm going to try to whiz through it real quick. I know we probably got other things out there to do today. But just to start out, I just want to thank all the fathers that are out there. We do have a very difficult job to do because as a father, to me, the buck has to stop somewhere. And that buck has to stop with the dad. And those are some of the responsibilities that I want to talk about today in our lesson. But to get into probably some of the funnier things, I went out on the internet, and of course, you can find a lot of stuff out there. I looked at some of the top 10 things that a father might say, and some of the top 10 things that a father won't say. So I didn't pull all 10, but I pulled up some of them I thought were pretty funny in that. So I want to share those things with you this morning. Here's one saying as far as the things that you might hear a father say. It says, you want to know the best way to double your money? Fold it and put it in your pocket. If you drive up in your car to my house, you honk the horn, you better be delivering a pizza because you're not taking my daughter. Don't worry about the mule going blind. You hold that line. Think about that. Your job, if you're plowing, is not to really worry about the mule going blind because you're there to hold that line and make sure that line is straight. So again, that's something that probably as fathers, you kind of tell your kids, hey, you do it, and this is what I want done. Don't worry about anything else that's going on around you. This is where I want you to go, period. Another one, fair. You want fair? A fair is where you take cows and pigs and you get a blue ribbon. All right, now we get into the other one. Things that you never hear a father say. I'll take my wallet and go crazy shopping. Number 2, no son of mine is going to live in my house without an earring. Now quit complaining and let's go to the mall. Number 3, your mother and I are going away for the weekend. You might want to consider throwing a party. And number 4, well, how about that? We're lost. I'm going to have to stop and ask someone for directions. So those are the things that you won't hear a father say, of course. You know, we are directional challenged, so we do not want to, if we're driving somewhere, stop and ask for directions. A father's responsibility, I have at the very top. The thoughts, and that came from GraceBibleNewYork.com from Scott L. Harris. It's just some of his topics that I pulled that I thought that were relevant for what I want to talk about today. And the main gist of his lesson comes from Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 9, where it says, these commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. I impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. Here Moses is really talking to the Israelites as children of God. And especially when you think about the law that God wrote for the Israelites, it's more than just the 10 Commandments. There's other rules and regulations. But he wanted him to understand, well, are these laws to be embedded upon your life? And what are we to do with those laws? How are we to remember and forward those laws? He says they are to be impressed on your children. We have a responsibility to teach the younger about God and His love and also His law that He has set before us. We do this through our daily living, setting the example, but also talking about them. It's important as children and also parents that you talk to your children and about God and about Christ, and how knowing your Father, the Father, that knows the best of what it is for you in your life. And that goes along with the title for the lesson today. The Father knows best. There is only one Father that we have in this world, and that's God, our Father in heaven. We all have earthly parents, but there is only one Father. Some of the things that also in verse 6 to 9, if you look at verse 5, the stuff that I have highlighted, it says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. That precedes verse 6. So whenever you stop to think about what is our purpose in life, it's to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your mind. And then he proceeds to tell you how to do it. And then today, as far as the topics go, I want to talk about provide for his family, 2, instruct his children, 3, to raise his children under the nurture and admonition of the Lord, and 4, the deadly one that we all hate, is discipline his children. First, it says to provide for his family. As men, we are built to hunt, fish. We're gatherers, hunters, gatherers. We're driven to go out for a certain thing. But Exodus chapter 20, verse 6, it says, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. This is an Old Testament requirement that the Israelites were to do. God laid that foundation in the very beginning and said, hey, 6 days you're to work, and on the 7th day, it's the Lord's day. It's to not do any work and to put Him first in your life. We're not bound underneath that Old Testament regulation, but we are bound to realize that those examples that were set before us were for a purpose. And that is for us to learn from that example. God wanted a special day set aside for Him. We do that on the first day of the week. As we start the week off, we put God first in our lives. That's what fathers are to do. Set that example. Exodus chapter 23, verse 16. And the feast of harvest, the first fruits of your labors, which you have sown in the field, and the feast of ingathering at the end of the year, when you have gathered in the fruit of your labors from the field. Here again, just goes to the point that there's more than just the 10 commandments. There's other feasts of the harvest, things that you do to produce an income for your family, and that you're also to, part of this is to return a portion of that as well. Psalms chapter 104, verse 23. Man goes out to his work and to his labor until the evening. There's no really set time, but a man should be going out and working and providing for his family and doing those things. We have a responsibility. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 26. The person who labors for himself, for his hungry mouth drives him on. 1 Timothy 5, verse 8. If anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. You don't have to have a special religion to understand you have a responsibility. You have a child. You have a family. You have parents, older parents. There's still that responsibility that you have as an individual to that person. As Christians, we realize that family is vitally important. And as a father, your responsibility is to provide for that family, to do what's necessary so that the things that are needed are given. But we also realize that God provides those things. Ecclesiastes 2, verse 11 and then 18 to 26. Then I looked on all the works that my hand had done, and on the labor in which I had toiled, and indeed it was vanity, and grasping for the wind. There was no profit under the sun. Then I hated all my labor in which I had toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or fool. Yet he will rule over all my labor in which I toiled, in which I have sown myself wise under the sun. This also is vanity. Therefore I turned my heart in despair of all the labor in which I had toiled under the sun. For there is a man, his children labored for it. This also is vanity, and a great evil. For what has man for all his labor, and for the striving of his heart, for which he has toiled under the sun? For all his days are sorrowful, and his work burdensome. Even in the night his heart takes no rest. This also is vanity. Nothing is better for a man than he should eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw was from the hand of God. For who can eat, or who can have enjoyment more than I? For God gives wisdom and knowledge and joy to a man who is good in his sight. But to the sinner he gives the work of gathering and collecting, that he may give to him who is good before God. This also is vanity and grasping for the wind. This is something that Solomon wrote in Ecclesiastes, because Solomon, whenever God asked him, what is it that you want? Solomon here, it's sort of like the genie whenever he comes out and grants you 3 wishes. God granted Solomon, whatever you want, I will give it to you. Solomon said, I want the wisdom to rule. Knowledge, that's what Solomon was seeking. And God said, you know what? That's not what he anticipated Solomon to ask. You would think that it would be earthly wealth, that new home, that new car, that whatever, something brand spanking new. But Solomon wanted wisdom. And God said, because you've asked for that, not only will I give you that, but I'll give you everything that you didn't ask for. And he provided Solomon great wealth, great knowledge. He built a temple that, if you really read in the Old Testament, it was a sight to behold. Gold, wood that's imported from all over the world, construction. I mean, there was no expense that was withheld from building that original temple. It was an awesome sight to behold. And at the end, near Solomon's life, he kind of fell away. He kind of forgot what it was about, life. And he says, well, now, throughout my entire life, I've gained all this wealth. But who's going to spend it? He's gained more than what he can even think about spending. Maybe the people that come before me, my sons, my daughters after me, are they going to use it properly? Are they going to be a fool and waste it? You know, I spent days, hours, weeks, months, years obtaining such wealth. But yet he saw all this as vanity. So you too, as fathers and as parents, think about your life and how you're structuring that life and that life with your children. Are you bringing them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord? Are you showing them the way, the right way, the proper way? And second, instructing children. Proverbs chapter 1 verse 8 says, "My son, hear the instruction of your father, and do not forsake the law of your mother." You know, your fathers instruct, but the mothers out there, they've got that iron fist out there. They're pretty much ruling that house. But as fathers, they need to instruct their children. This is the way you need to be living your life. First Thessalonians 2, verse 10 and 12. "You are witnesses, and God also, how devoutly and justly and blamelessly we behave ourselves among you who believe. As you know, how we exhorted and comforted and charged every one of you, as a father does his own children, that you would walk worthy of God, who calls you into his own kingdom and glory." Here Paul tells the church there in Thessalonica, this is the example that I gave to you as a father does his own children. That is, to not provoke them, or wait, it says to exhort, comfort, and charge. That means to teach, to lay down that foundation. This is what I want you to do. And then finally, raising his children under the nurture and admonition of the Lord. I know in Sunday school this is one thing that we talked about, and that my dad was this was one of those things as a dad that in his life he made a stand. He says, as long as you live in this house and underneath this roof, on Sunday, we're going to be at church. Period. There is no, negotiation. There is no questioning. This is what we will do. Period. And one of my brothers, as soon as he turned 18, he was out the door. But whenever I look back at my life and how my dad tried to live and structure our lives, Sunday was one of those important days. That we knew that no matter what, we would be at church. Amen. There's a reason behind it. Where are you going to hear the message about God? Where are you going to hear about the Word being preached? And how are you supposed to live your life? My dad wasn't very much of a talker. He was very much of a disciplinarian person, but he wasn't that much of a talker. But he knew where I would get the good foundation and where it needed to be. And that, to me, is something that if my dad felt was important for me to do, it needs to be something that's important in my life too, is to be at church on Sunday. Again, it's where you're going to hear the message, the hope, the salvation that you need, not just for this life, but the life to come. This life that we live is just temporal, here and now. It's the life eternal that's more important. Colossians chapter 3, verse 21 says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged." And as fathers, we're tall than our children. We're stronger than our children. We have the responsibility to hold back that strength. How much discipline is too much discipline? Where is that line, that magic line that you have to deal with? Instructing. We have to realize too that provoking your children is not the right way either. Pushing them. How far can I push that child? You're definitely more intelligent than the child. How far do you need to push them? Psalms chapter 32, verse 8 to 9 says, "I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will guide you with my eye. Do not be like the horse or like the mule, which have no understanding, which must be harnessed with a bit and a bridle, else they will not come near you." If we are harsh, if we don't teach the right way or guide the right way, what's going to happen with our kids? They're going to be the first one out the door. They don't want anything to do with you as an individual, as a father. Some parents and lives, kids have a rough life. They don't know where to go, what to do. And then finally, disciplining your children. I want to look at Proverbs chapter 13, Proverbs chapter 13, verse 24. It says, "He who spares his rod hates his son, but he who loves him disciplines him promptly." Sparing the rod doesn't do any good either. Part of your job as a father is disciplining. That's one of the hardest jobs. I know probably kids, I've heard it as a kid too. This spanking is going to do more for you. It's going to hurt me worse than what it hurts you. I'm sure everybody's heard that. But whenever you stop to think about why did you say that? Because really by giving that spanking, you're saying really that you failed as a parent. You failed as a father. You've tried every other option, and all those options have failed. So where is that last option? That board of education. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 8 to 11. "If you endure chastening, God deals with you as with sons. For what son is there whom a father does not chasten? But if you are without chastening, of which all have become partakers, then you are illegitimate and not sons. Furthermore, we have had human fathers who corrected us, and we paid them respect. Shall we not much more readily be subjected to the Father of spirits and live? For they are partakers of his holiness. Now no chastening seems to be joyful for the present, but painful nevertheless. Afterward it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. If you don't correct your children, they're disciplining. How much do you really love them? Think about that, the opposite side. I don't want to spank my child, or I don't want to give them a harsh punishment. What are you really doing for that child? You're telling them that you don't love them enough. There are times in which a correction is needed. And then finally, Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 18 to 21. And children, I want you to perk up here, because this is something that in the Old Testament, this is what they did to kids that became totally unruly and they couldn't control them. It says, if a man has a stubborn and rebellious son, who will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and who, when they have chastened him, will not heed them, then his father and mother shall take hold of them and bring them out to the elders of the city, to the gate of his city. And they shall say to the elders of his city, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and drunkard. Then all the men of the city shall stone him to death with stones. So you shall put away the evil from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear. Think about what they did to children that were stubborn and wouldn't listen to their parents and were rebellious. They actually took them to the city gates, and the elders and that stoned them to death. We don't do that today. But here in the Old Testament, that's something that they did. And the purpose of it is so that all of Israel would hear and fear. Old saying, mothers, they said, I brought you into the world, I can take you out. God brought you into this world, and God can take you out. Our God is bigger, stronger. He knows our needs. He knows that each and every one of us as children, we need a father, but a father who is loving and wants to support his family and do right before God. They want to set that example within your children to lead them, guide them, admonish them. That's what fathers do, and that's one of the requirements. Our Heavenly Father does that with us each and every day in our lives. He provides us for our needs. And when we need a correction, that correction is swift and immediate. There are things in our life that sometimes we don't like, but we have to do it. Each and every week we always offer an invitation. An invitation is to those who have not put on Christ and to be buried in the watery grave and be raised out of that grave a new person. As fathers, it's important. But also, too, it's important that we're here each and every week, that we get a message of comfort, of encouragement, of exhortation. I mean, sometimes the things that we hear about may not be what we want to hear, but it's something that we need to hear.